What is up, YouTube? It's Pensive Fox, and these are my thoughts. While in Colorado, I kept hearing about and seeing on social media something about a movie called Bird Box. So naturally, when we got back, my fiance and I pulled up Netflix and watched it. Needless to say, I am unimpressed. In fact, I am so disappointed by the movie that I decided to completely nix the video I was planning on making and make a review instead. So let's get into it. If you haven't seen Bird Box, you can go on Netflix and watch it for free. It's like, I think a little over 2 hours. That's what it felt like. I might be completely wrong. Obviously, there is going to be major spoilers in this video, so if you don't want to get spoiled on the movie, put me on your watch later playlist and go watch it, and then in about 2-3 hours, come back and watch this video. So, when I went into watching the movie, I thought it was a thriller, and by the end of the movie, I wasn't really sure what they thought they were categorizing it as. So I looked it up, and yeah, it seems to be categorized under the suspense thriller sort of theme. I don't really understand where they got that from, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. In my research, I learned that the movie is actually based off a novel by John Mallerman, and the book he wrote was published in 2014, and it was titled Bird Box. So for this review, obviously I didn't know the novel existed before I watched the movie, so I haven't read the novel. This review is just on the movie, so I'm just gonna get one thing out of the way. One of my greatest pet peeves is when people say, oh, it was better in the books. That is a terrible excuse for a movie. A movie should be able to stand on its own as its own story within that universe. If it can't, it's a bad movie, regardless of if the books are good or not. And we, as consumers of this media, need to accept that. There are some die-hard Harry Potter fans who defend the movies for some reason, even though they suck. And the books might be great. That's awesome. But the movies suck. So it's just my belief that regardless of what the book did, the movie should be able to stand on its own and should be able to accurately tell a story without you needing to read the book, because otherwise you're just alienating a large portion of the population who has not read the book or doesn't know the book exists, like myself and like thousands of other people who I'm sure have watched the movie and have not read the book. So let's go ahead and just get this out of the way. How about we start listing off all the fun tropes that just immediately pop up in the first 30 minutes of the movie, which are insanely annoying, especially for this category where tropes are so cheesy. Ugh. We immediately get introduced to this group leader turned martyr named Greg. And then there's this sweet old woman whose name no one ever remembers because she only shows up in convenient moments to crack pots over people's heads. And then there's the innocent, naive girl named Olympia. Then there's the asshole who's actually a decent guy, who's Douglas. And then there's the sometimes awkwardly funny, sacrificial black guy. And that's Charlie. Honestly, in the beginning of the movie, I saw the tropes and I was like, you know what? They're not gonna do it. They're gonna make these characters super interesting. Charlie came off as someone who had a lot of potential, and so did Douglas. But the problem with Charlie is that they decided to just kill him off. Just kill him off, because in a thriller or horror movie, you can't have more than one black guy. And I'm usually not the person who gets mad about that kind of stuff. Like, I usually am just like, if a character dies, a character dies. But it's such a huge trope to have that black character who's like sort of funny or awkward and then like just dies for no reason in this really stupid way trying to save everyone. We're in 2019. Can we think of anything else to do with our extra black characters? He had a lot of potential because out of everyone in the group, he had prior knowledge of whatever these creatures were, which they never really told us in the movie if these were monsters, aliens, demons, angels. They never clarified, which is super annoying. So for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to call them creatures or monsters. But he seems to have the most knowledge of these creatures, And it was only mentioned in one scene in which everyone made fun of him, and then it was never brought up again except to sort of say like, oh, you could use this for your book. Like, in a super condescending way that's just not cool. Like, he had the potential to be this character who could lead them, who could strategize these plans. He had this prior knowledge that they could have started testing. Someone could have asked, hey, what did all these myths and lore and what did all this prior research tell you, so that we can start testing and seeing if their strengths and weaknesses match said myth or lore, so we can find out what these actually are. But no one did that because no one gave a shit, because he was gonna die anyway. And then the way he died was so stupid. Like, we're talking about a door, right? This metal door, and they unlock it and there's a bunch of people on one side and one guy on the other side. And we've already seen that these creatures don't interact with doors because for some reason they can't get into the house, which really doesn't make any sense to me. They also don't explain why they can't get into the house. Can these creatures not physically interact with the world? That's not true, because every time they're around, a bunch of leaves kick up and the trees blow like the wind is howling or some shit. But for some reason, they can't physically interact with doors or windows or people, really. They never really touch anyone. And I'm not really sure if they even have a physical form, but if that's true, then how were they setting off the car sensors if they weren't actually physically there? That's another thing that isn't explained, is how they interact with technology and how that worked. Because at one point, Greg had this super cool theory about how the technology would work and how they could do it almost like Medusa style, where you like hold the mirror up so you don't have to directly look at her. But then that doesn't work, and they never really explain why that doesn't work and why these creatures can communicate through technology like that. And then in which case I ask the question, why are you using the radios for the rest of the movie if you know that technology has been compromised? And it's not just sight, apparently it's also sound, because there's a few times in the movie that the characters are like disoriented by the sound, and you can see them almost wanting to take their blindfold off because they hear this dead person talking to them. Anyway, back to Charlie's death. You have a bunch of people on one side of the door, one person on the other side of the door, and you're telling me that this one person can fight off these three people? I don't care if one of them is a girl. I don't care if one of them is an older man. Like, there's three other people pushing on the door. That's enough force to shut it. And he didn't have to tackle the guy. Like, he could have thrown something. They could have just punched the guy in the eye to get him to back off the door. There's no reason Charlie had to jump into that loading dock area with the convict whose name I forgot. The grocery store guy who was a prior convict or whatever. There's no reason for that self-sacrificial thing. And we've also already proven Charlie is the least courageous of everyone in the group. He's already proven he's not the badass. He's the nerdy guy who did this research for his book who works in a grocery store. That's who he is. Like, it was such an inconsistent moment with his character, and it was such a dumb way to die. Like, it didn't make any sense. I didn't really understand why he had to die there. It was just them, I guess, trying to stir up some plot. The second character who turned into a crazy trope was Douglas. I thought he was a really cool guy, and I could see in the beginning that his cold-heartedness and sort of apathy towards the whole situation was because he didn't know how to deal with losing the people he loved. And yeah, he was sort of an asshole before, as was explained in a scene in the kitchen over a glass of whiskey with Mallory. Overall, it just seemed like a guy who was going through a hard time and he didn't know how to cope. And that doesn't make him evil, but the movie definitely portrays him in that way, and they make him that gun-ho sort of guy, like, I'm just gonna point the gun at you right away and be suspicious of a pregnant lady. But then in that same scene I just mentioned, with the kitchen and Mallory over the glass of whiskey and everything, that scene you get a lot of insight into his character and who he is, and kind of what he thinks of himself and what he thinks of Mallory. And he already says, I know that everyone thinks different things of me, and I know everyone's opinion of me already. And you really get a sense of her character as well and what she had to grow up with a father that was like that. So in my mind, I'm thinking, this is a really cool moment between these characters. This could really kind of solidify a connection between them. And I legitimately started to believe that these are the only two characters who are going to make it in the end. But then I remembered, oh wait, in the beginning, it's just her and two kids. And then all I was hoping for is, however Douglas dies, it needs to be worth something. It needs to mean something. And it needs to be something true to his character. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Anyway, so then this guy named Gary shows up, and there's a scene where Mallory grabs the gun, and she's sort of in this position that Douglas was in when she first came in, where she's pointing the gun at Gary. And it's a super cool scene where I'm like, holy shit, her and Douglas are more alike than she wants to believe. And then Gary comes into the room, and everyone's like, oh, maybe we'll let this Gary guy stay. And even Mallory is starting to sort of believe that. And then Douglas grabs the gun, points it at the guy, and says he needs to leave, and anyone else needs to leave. And anyone else who thinks he should stay needs to leave with him. And that's the moment where I was like, okay, Douglas is being Douglas again. But also, it would be so cool if in this moment, Mallory sided with him, because she was the one who initially grabbed the gun and pointed it at the guy and told him to get down and stop and get on the ground and stop what he was doing. That's not what happened. Like, the movie does a really good job of setting up this strong female lead who is apathetic, who's not this empathetic female like we see, like this empathetic heroine that we see so many times in modern media. It's this woman who has trouble with emotion, this woman who doesn't know how to cope with things and doesn't know how to show emotion in the first place. But then they have scenes like this where, oh no, she has to be better than Douglas because he's the evil asshole right now. And just because you're trying to survive and you don't understand other people's emotions doesn't make you an asshole necessarily, and it doesn't make you evil. And that's definitely how Mallory sort of turned the tide onto Greg. And this is also the scene that said sweet old woman shows up randomly and hits Greg over the head with a clay pot. It's 2019, people. We can do better than this. So, moving on from that scene and my pure disappointment with the characters' inconsistencies, let's talk about Gary. Now, Gary is a wonderful character, right? He's that guy who comes in that everyone's suspicious of at first, but then he earns everyone's trust and then ends up backstabbing them because, oh, he's actually the killer, oh my god. Another trope. But what pisses me off the most about this movie, what truly gets under my skin, is the fact that they villainize the mentally ill. Hey guys, guess what year it is? It's 2019. The mentally ill are not violent, and they are not cruel, evil people who, given the chance, are going to do horrific things. Yes, there are sick, disgusting people out there who wish to do harm to others. But is that all of the mentally ill? No. Is that even a fraction of them? Not really. It's literally less than like 0.5% of diagnosed people. And even those, it's just because they have no sense of right or wrong. It's not a bad thing. I don't care what was in the book. I don't know if that was even in the book because I didn't read it. But you're telling me that everyone on the production team of this movie, like all those hundreds of people, didn't see anything wrong with the main antagonists of the movie other than the creatures being the mentally ill? But then what's worse than that is they never even give you a clear reason why. the reason that's sort of just assumed and the reason that's pushed is just, oh, they were already crazy, so the monsters can't make them more crazy. Like, normal people, when you look at the monster, you're going to get suicidally crazy and just kill yourself. But if a crazy person looks at it, they're just gonna wanna be its fucking worshiper. Like, what is that? That is so sick. And it ticks me off because I'm like, they don't really explain the monster's power. Like, they allude to it a lot in the beginning, and at first I'm like, oh, I have a handle on this. I know what it's doing. And then they throw this into there, and I'm like, so what is the monster doing? Are you saying that it doesn't have an effect on them because they're already crazy, or that it has a different effect on them because they're crazy? But then, why is it the mentally ill? Why isn't it a different group of people? Why is it this certain group of people that are affected by the creature? But then also, are animals affected by the creature? Because they have less developed brains than us. So it would be easier to do this to an animal, surely. What's the point of doing this to a human? Like, what's the goal here? Because they're not eating them, because the humans are killing themselves and the bodies are left all over the streets, just rotting. So it's not for food. So then what is it? And they never tell us. They never tell us in the movie why these monsters are doing what they're doing, where they're from, what their purpose is, or how their power works. Also, what's their metric for the clinically insane or the mentally ill? Do you have to have been diagnosed with something like schizophrenia or DID or something of that nature? Or is it more broad, like you could just have depression and be a part of this cult sort of group? What I would have done differently, well, first, the mentally ill would not have been my secondary villains, but what I would have done differently with that concept is I would have had someone in the protagonist group be mentally ill, be diagnosed with something, you know, just like anything, like schizophrenia or OCD, something of the nature, and be with the protagonist. Like, they also never give a reason for the insane to be siding with the creatures. Is it the creatures literally twisting those people's minds around? In which case, why can't they do that to other people's minds? Why are they only doing it to this certain type of people? Again, all of these questions, none of them answered. And it just makes the mentally ill look like terrible people. And I hate that. I hate that in 2019 that is still a trope that's being allowed in movies. These people go through so much in their life already without the stigma of being violent or crazy. And it's so sad because I know people who are diagnosed with mental illnesses of that, you know, of the like, and most of the time you're not gonna know, because they don't tell people because they're afraid of what people will think of them. They'll be afraid of how people think of them differently. Like, oh, they know I have schizophrenia, they're gonna think I'm always hearing voices in my head or seeing people, and that's not the case. Sick. It's a terrible thing to do, and to be portrayed in movies that way as well. It just gives people all these misconceptions about what someone's mental illness is, and it's so disheartening, honestly. Like, it's so disappointing, especially when we've made so many great strides to try and get the mentally ill, like, represented and, like, just, like, shown, like, these are people who deserve rights, who shouldn't be put in institutions, who can live in society when given the proper tools and given the proper help and, like, medical care by professionals. And it's so disheartening to see them portrayed in this way where it's like, oh yeah, something post-apocalyptic happens and they escape and they're all immediately bad now and they just want to kill everyone and everyone to be killed. It's just terrible, and they give no reason for it, which just makes it even more sickening to me. Like, at least try and bullshit me a little bit about why that's your, just, ugh. I need to move on because I'm gonna raise my blood pressure. Let's talk about Greg, the leader turned martyr. He had that scene with the monitors where he was trying to look through the cameras, and his theory was that, basically like the Medusa theory where you hold up the mirror, because you're not directly looking at Medusa, her powers aren't going to really work on you unless you're directly looking at her. And that was his sort of theory, and it didn't work. And what disappointed me the most is they didn't really explain why that theory didn't work. They didn't tell us how these creatures could interact with technology in that manner and why they had such an effect on it. Another thing I had a problem with was in the movie, they never show the actual monster. So this can be a device you use in a movie to create suspense, but didn't really create suspense for me. In the beginning, it was interesting because it's almost like you're looking through Mallory's eyes, seeing all this destruction and chaos happening around you and not fully comprehending or understanding why it's happening. But then later on in the movie, after you understand and comprehend, like after you get what's happening, I would have liked to have known what a character was seeing before they died. Not just like, oh, you hear her talking to her dead mother. It's like, no, what did she see though? What did she see that made her walk into that flaming car? So I'm gonna go off on a little bit of a tangent here. So last year, for the first time, I saw Annihilation, and that's kind of what I've been using as a metric for this movie because I was led to believe they were sort of gonna be in the same category, and I can definitely tell you they shouldn't be. Annihilation is one of my top 10 favorite movies because it was beautifully composed in this manner that was unique and that told a beautiful story. One that made me cry, actually. And throughout the movie, you wonder why the aliens are there, what their purpose is. I mean, that's the question everyone's asking. Why are you here? The difference between the two movies, Annihilation tells you why the aliens are there, what their purpose is, and it gives you their appearance, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but in like alien movies, I feel like that's a big deal. Like, we want to know what these creatures look like and how they differ from us and how their anatomy sort of works. Annihilation was told in a different order in certain scenes, just like in Bird Box. However, in Annihilation, this sequence had meaning and purpose, and there was a reveal at the end to its purpose, because you don't really understand that these are flash forwards until the very end. And in Bird Box, it wasn't necessarily like they had any purpose. There was no real reveal. We know from the beginning that none of these people were introduced to survive because none of them are with her. That should be pretty obvious, I think. Regardless, I think that this movie could have learned a lot from Annihilation, and I think they didn't. I think they went the tropey route and did everything the wrong way. Also, this is a sort of nitpicky little thing, but the rapids at the end, come on. Okay, I had a hard time believing that she got by unscathed, but those two supposedly 5 years old children who definitely have not had any way to learn how to swim, like, think of how many 5-year-olds today can swim, like, just in a normal swimming pool proficiently. Probably less than 1%. Now think of putting those same 5-year-olds in rapids that aren't just like small little river rapids. Like, these are rapids. These are tear your boat apart rapids. And these kids came out unscathed? I'm sorry, but no. This is one of the reasons I hate... Whoa. Hey! Sorry. The sun is setting. I just noticed how dark the video got. But this is one of the reasons I hate children in movies. Like, not the actors themselves, because these child actors were great. Like, these children were believable and really interesting. I actually applaud the actor, the little child actors. They were great. They were adorable. But I hate children being used as plot devices because oftentimes they're just there to hinder the protagonist and they don't really do anything, and the director or the writers don't have enough balls to kill them off or hurt them in any way because they're kids. We gotta keep the kids safe. And that's really annoying because there's no consequence to them being in that dangerous situation in the first place, so why even have the kids there? And then towards the end, there's a forest scene where the little girl, whose literal name at that point is Girl, which just cracks me up, thinks about taking her blindfold off. And my question at that point is, she, out of everyone in that scene, should have been able to determine that it wasn't Mallory. You want to know why? Because earlier in the movie they established the birds freak the fuck out when those creatures are near. And this girl literally had the bird box attached to her the whole time. And it was still on her in that scene. You can see it before, during, and after that scene. She has it the whole time, and we've already been told the birds are still alive. There's nothing wrong with them. So why does she not hear them or feel them fluttering around, freaking out against her body? Because that creature coming towards her was obviously not Mallory. And then you hear Mallory like giving this whole spiel about, I'm sorry, I should have let Tom finish his story. And then it just becomes this sappy, cheesy moment where you're like, what movie am I watching again? Is this supposed to be a thriller, or is this about a mom learning how to be a mom? I mean, I guess both, but like, that's not really what I came here to watch. So, I don't know. Anyway, the reveal that the sanctuary was blind people was pretty cool. That was neat. And honestly, I would argue a good thing they could have done was switch the mentally ill with the blind people so that the only people who could have looked upon the creature and actually seen it, so the blind people, they're like, this is the only thing they can see is this creature, but it has no effect on them. That would have been cool. Because a lot of times during the movie, you forget, because they never show you in the scenes, they just show you moving leaves, you forget that the characters can see the creatures. Everyone can see the creatures, but the creatures have a different effect on apparently the sane and the insane. But it has basically no effect on blind people because they can't see. At that point, it has to have a physical form. Because if it doesn't have some sort of physical form you can actually see, then that means it's just mentally fucking with you. It has some sort of mental, like, telepathy, right? And it would be able to affect blind people because it just has to... Forget it. Forget it, because they don't do it in the movie, so forget it. Other than the plot, the soundtrack was nothing to be impressed by. It didn't wow me at all. Annihilation's soundtrack, however, amazing. Like, if you haven't seen Annihilation, you should go see Annihilation. Here are some pros. The concept of the monsters being these eldritch sort of creatures was very compelling to me. Their powers, when first described, seem very eldritch, but they never delved any deeper into that, so it became a problem. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Bird Box. Let me know down in the comments what you think, if you've seen the movie and what you thought of it. If you're looking for good movies to watch that came out last year, here's a few I watched that I really enjoyed. So Spider-Verse came out, and it's really good, truly revolutionary for like the animated movies genre. Then there's Aquaman, which was really cool. I had never really read much on that character before, so going in and seeing that was great, and the actor also did a really good performance. Annihilation, of course. If you're looking for the thriller suspense genre, Annihilation is what you want to watch if you haven't seen it. Wind River. Ooh, if you haven't seen Wind River, that's a good film to watch. It's on Netflix too, I think. Oh, and Venom. I went and saw Venom the same day I saw Spider-Verse. Venom's honestly, in my opinion, not getting much credit where credit is due. It's a good film. And like, I've heard a lot of people say they're mad that Spider-Man isn't in it or something, and I'm just like, it's not Spider-Man's movie. It's about this character and how he becomes this villain. It's a good character study. And in the beginning, it feels like you're just following a normal dude's life. And I really appreciate that. It didn't feel like a superhero movie until the very end, and that was nice. So those are just a handful of movies that I recently have seen that I enjoy a lot more than Bird Box. Let me know down in the comments some of your favorite thriller, suspense movies, because I really have started to love this genre specifically, and I want to start watching more movies in that genre. So let me know some of your favorites. Let me know what you thought of Bird Box. Like the video if you enjoyed what I had to say, and subscribe to my channel for more content. Also, you should go to Amazon and buy my ebook. It's poetry if you're into that sort of thing. My friends and I also do a podcast on Podbean. I will leave the name down in the description so you can come find us. We do reviews on media and just talk about life in general. Our most recent podcast is on our favorite movies and how they have inspired us as writers and creators. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys go. As you can see, everything is getting dark around me. I'm losing the sunlight, so I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap this video up and say goodnight to everyone. Thumbs up if you liked what I had to say. Comment down below any questions or concerns or your opinions, whatever, and subscribe to my channel for more content. Bye!